All right, guys, with the start of the NFL season rapidly approaching, it's about high time we get our butts in gear over here and wrap up our preseason rankings for the 2023 fantasy football season. We've already talked quite a bit about the running back and wide receiver position, so today we're turning our attention towards the quarterback position. As always, like the video, comment down below if you agree or disagree with these quarterback takes, subscribe to the channel if you are new here, and I'll see you on the other side of that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, where we are continuing our breakdown and rankings of all fantasy relevant positions for the 2023 redraft season. We've already talked over a few episodes, I may add, about the running back and wide receiver prospect, but now we turn our attention to those onesie positions, the ones that maybe are viewed as less valuable in fantasy football, in tight ends and quarterbacks. I know we kind of split running backs and wide receivers over a couple days, but with that, we talked about 25 to 30 prospects. Today, at most, we're talking about 15 prospects with the quarterback position. So we'll keep it all succinct and in one video. And then we'll do the same for tight ends on Thursday. Maybe even less tight end prospects to cover, just because I think that's maybe even a less relevant position than quarterbacks. Maybe they were considered similar as, streamers, positions you'd punt down the board. But I think it's time that we really scrutinize the quarterback position and how it's evolved over the past couple years, adding certain facets to the game with, quarterbacks rushing yards with a heightened emphasis on the passing attack and offense in NFL football, and what those repercussions mean for us in the fantasy community and how those points are tallied. I know just a couple years ago, the benchmark was always 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think most people would consider that with those quarterbacks' performance nowadays, that's going to be a pretty underwhelming performance and not going to get you anywhere close to sniffing the playoffs, let alone a championship. So as the quarterback position evolves in the NFL, it's also evolving for fantasy football. And we saw last year how special those top end performers were and how crucial they were to getting you to a fantasy football championship. So without further ado, let's jump in. We're going to talk about my top 15 prospects at the quarterback position today. Obviously, the top 10 to 12, which are going to be the main starters for your leagues. And then we can talk about some of those high-end backups. Maybe some of those guys that, if you snag a Lamar Jackson or a Tua, obviously there with the injury concerns with both of them, maybe Justin Fields with a little bit of the inconsistency concerns for him, maybe snagging one of these high-end backups a round or two before your league mates could prove off quite valuable. So without further ado, let's jump into my quarterback one, and I'm going to buck the trend a little bit. I'm not saying he's the best quarterback in the entire NFL, but I think he is the best quarterback for fantasy football. I think it's, there's no argument that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the entire NFL right now. But as far as, fantasy football on the way points are scored, this guy, Jalen Hurts, is the absolute creme de la creme. And right now, I am a little bit higher on him than anybody else. He's currently ranked the quarterback 3 going in at the end of the second, start of the third round in most fantasy drafts according to Sleeper. Last season, he finished as the quarterback 3, but that's only because he missed the last 2 games of the fantasy football season. If you look at a points per game metric, he had the highest points per game with 25.6 points per game at the quarterback position, followed by Patrick Mahomes at 25.2 and Josh Allen at 24.2. So if he stays on the field healthy, then obviously we're looking at a guy who would have been the quarterback 1. And I think going into 2023, he is a guy that I project is the one that can consistently repeat last season's efforts and be actually finished as the quarterback 1 this year. And, you might say, well, he's a rushing quarterback. He's going to be prone to those injuries. This whole shoulder injury last year that kept him out for week 16 and 17 and really hampered a lot of people's fantasy championships, especially in championship week. I get that, but we look at all 3 of the top end quarterbacks in Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. All 3 of those guys suffered severe injuries. Maybe not severe, but they all suffered pretty crucial injuries throughout the season. We see Josh Allen with the UCL in his elbow, Jalen Hurts with his shoulder injury in week 15, Patrick Mahomes with the ankle injury, turf toe, whatever variation of it that was throughout the playoffs. These quarterbacks are going to susceptibly hurt. You can't bank on injury history repeating itself. And I think actually out of all 3 of these guys, Jalen Hurts is the guy that, based on, the way he attacks off-season workouts, how strong he is, like the fact that he is a power lifter, that he builds his body the right way, he can squat 600 pounds, that he is the guy most adverse to injury risk. So I'd actually feel, even with him missing those 2 games last season, I feel the most safe with Jalen Hurts when it comes to an injury standpoint. And frankly, the reason that puts Jalen Hurts for me above Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen as my QB1 is the fact that he is the de facto goal line running back for this team. We saw how successful that double cheek push was for the Philadelphia Eagles last season. They converted it at a rate of 4th and 1s at 92%. And when you got into the red zone, it was almost a guarantee that Jalen Hurts is going to get, thrown into the end zone, following Jason Kelce and being pushed by Dallas Goedert and Jack Stoll. So, and the fact that they didn't really bring in any high-end running backs, they let go of Miles Sanders. They only brought in Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift, both of whom are getting paid less than Boston Scott. So I think this is truly running back by committee, where they approach a lot of the designed runs and a lot of the goal line work is going to be ceded to Jalen Hurts. And that's very, very valuable, because that's where we get the most valuable points for fantasy. It's not from wins. It's not from passing touchdowns. It's from rushing ability and rushing touchdowns. And Jalen Hurts definitely has that edge over Patrick Mahomes. I will say this is with a 4-point passing TD league. Maybe it's a 6-point passing TD. My opinions on Mahomes will be skewed a little bit differently. But for right now, I think the majority of the leagues are played with 4-point passing TDs. And with that being said, Jalen Hurts takes the cake for me. So that's QB1. Let's look at QB2, which, to no surprise, is Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, an absolute dominant quarterback, both in NFL and in fantasy. He's a QB1 overall this year, being taken at the start to middle of the second round is where his ADP currently falls. He finished last year as the quarterback 1 as well, and he really, put an exclamation point on it, finishing with the second highest points per game when it comes to 25.2. I don't think there really needs to be that much said about Patrick Mahomes. Last season was definitely a proven season without Tyreek Hill, but really he had his de facto wide receiver 1 in Travis Kelce still there, and Travis Kelce still looks to be a dominant force when it comes to the pass catching role for the Kansas City Chiefs, even though he is 34 years of age, basically ancient when it comes to the NFL. I know it's really not, 34 is not that old, but when we look at players in the NFL, it's quite high up there. But his play doesn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon, and with that safety blanket / lethal downfield threat for Patrick Mahomes, it's going to continue to open up a ton of different routes for him, not only to rack up the touchdowns, rack up the receiving yards, but also continue to win games. And I think he also benefits quite a bit from Andy Reid. They bring in Rashee Rice. Justin Ross is having himself a little bit of a breakout during training camp right now. They lose Juju Smith-Schuster, but hopefully Sky Moore steps up and takes that next level and becomes more involved with this offense. You have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jerick McKinnon, Isaiah Pacheco still coming back. You have Noah Gray and Blake Bell, who are guys in their own right, are very comparable tight ends. And we know last year that even without a dominant wide receiver 1, there will be no true wide receiver 1. There will be no 1,000 yards wide receiver. I'm confident of that. Despite Patrick Mahomes throwing for almost 5,000 yards, there will be no 1,000 yard receiver. Kelsey's a tight end. I'm talking about a pure wide receiver. But with Patrick Mahomes' ability to spread out the ball, with the creativity of Andy Reid and the offensive play schemes and the ability to get it to Kadarius Toney as long as he can stay healthy, Justin Ross if he can stay healthy, Sky Moore, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, Rashee Rice, he just has enough weapons where maybe you're a little bit adverse to the wide receivers at Kansas City, but Patrick Mahomes, he'll be sure to get his, and just, I don't know much more can say than he's just dominant for NFL, and that's generally translates to dominance for fantasy football. I could be here for another 30 minutes talking about how great Patrick Mahomes is. Go watch the quarterback documentary on Netflix. He's great. Don't overthink it. Last in my top tier, you have the big 3 quarterbacks, and I don't think I'm disagreeing with many people in the fantasy community on that. You have Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and coming in at 3 is going to be Josh Allen, quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He's currently the quarterback 2, but he is back-to-back with Jalen Hurts in ADP, and I've seen people rank Jalen Hurts ahead of him. I think it's really kind of pick your own poison, who you like better. I don't think the difference between the 2 players is really that significant. They're both being picked towards the back of the second round, start of the third round, and Josh Allen was a little bit worse in points per game last year, finishing with only 24.2 points per game. The biggest thing here with Josh Allen is just the same way we talked about Jalen Hurts. He is the de facto running back for the Buffalo Bills. Despite all the hype around James Cook in training camp, despite bringing in Dameon Pierce, there were certainly games last year where the bulk of the carries went to Josh Allen. I believe it was week 14 where Allen had 13 carries. Singletary had 11 carries, and James Cook had 4 or 5 carries. So, they're confident as long as they are, confident in Josh Allen's health. I know that was a big concern with his UCL injury, but he should be entirely back from that. But, running him out there with designed run plays, with his scrambling ability, he's a massive human being, towering over most people on the football field at 6'5" and almost 240 pounds, so he can definitely take a beating. He is maybe not as accurate a passer as Mahomes or Allen, but he's definitely a guy that's more willing to scramble outside the pocket and gain you those rushing yards. And the fact that he has just, that insane rushing upside ability, always scrambling in touchdowns, is truly the reason why he's been a dominant fantasy force over the past few years. You still have his alpha wide receiver in Stephon Diggs, a guy that's really going to open up the offense for him. And they've only committed to increasing his offensive weapons, bringing in Dalton Kincaid to hopefully be what Gabe Davis could not be last year. So, adding a true slot weapon and Dalton Kincaid, keeping Gabe Davis as the deep threat, hopefully opens up the offense a little bit more for him. And he has a little bit better passing offense this year. But overall, it's going to be a very dynamic offense in Buffalo that, Josh Allen in the 3rd round. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great pick. So he's my number 3 quarterback, and that's going to wrap up, tier 1 of Hurts, Mahomes, and Allen. Let's jump into tier 2, which is going to be also consists of 3 quarterbacks, and we're going to start off with Joe Burrow. I contemplated putting Lamar Jackson over Joe Burrow here, just because I do think Lamar has a little bit more upside over Joe Burrow, but we'll talk about that when we get to Lamar. But there also are some, major concerns and some major downsides. And I just think Joe Burrow in and of himself, his floor is higher, and the guaranteed output that Joe Burrow will give you is definitely gonna be better. He has just an insane amount of offensive weapons. Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon comes back. Chase Brown is a decent pass catching running back. T. Higgins, how could I forget him? Tyler Boyd is still there. Charlie Jones actually has been showing out in preseason. Andre Yosefis actually had some pretty good catches in preseason as well. It's just going to be, a team that's heavily going to rely on Joe Burrow. We saw throughout the first 2 games of the 2022 fantasy football season, we saw Zach Taylor really try to implement this balanced offensive strategy when it came to the Bengals. It was really 50-50 between rushing attempts and passing attempts. And guess what? We remember Joe Burrow and the Bengals as a whole were abysmal for those first 2 games. And then Zach Taylor kind of realized this isn't working. Let's go back to what we were doing that worked, that got us in the Super Bowl in 2021. Give Joe the ball, let him sling it, favor the passing game, and let him go to work. And then we saw the Bengals just absolutely explode, obviously, riding that high all the way until the AFC Championship, where they ran into the buzzsaw of the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think Zach Taylor learned his lesson. I think he learned that this is never going to be a team that is going to be a ground and pound team. They're never going to set the pace with Joe Mixon, with a Chase Brown. And I think, it's really emphasized by the fact that Joe Mixon's efficiency really declined last season despite the offensive efficiency going up. We're going to see Zach Taylor really rely on Joe Burrow and put the ball in Joe's hands. And with him getting 25, 30, frankly, over 30 plus pass attempts per game, I'm really confident on the baseline that Joe Burrow can get you. And obviously he can have those really high explosive games where he throws 4 passing touchdowns. He's, not a complete statue in the pocket like a Phil Rivers. He has scrambled in for touchdowns. He can't get you that upside. And, he did have a couple 30-point games. So the high floor with the ability for, some ceiling games, some win you week games is why Joe Burrow's number 4. He's also number 4 quarterback on the sleeper rankings, which, we're consensus on that. He's being drafted really in the end of the 4th, start of the 5th round, which I think it's a little rich. The top 3 quarterbacks, I think, are difference makers I'd be willing to take in the 3rd round, but once you fall outside of that, I'm probably waiting until the 5th round to take either one of these guys in tier 2. So moving on to quarterback number 5 is going to be Lamar Jackson. Very similar in ADP and rankings compared to Joe Burrow. He also kind of fits in around the end of the 4th, start of the 5th round. Again, if he's a guy that's available in the 5th round, I'm snatching him up every single time. He's currently ranked the quarterback 5 via sleeper, so we are in alignment on that one. Last season, he did finish as the quarterback 14, which is very disappointing, except for the fact you realize he missed almost half the season with an injury. You don't know how much that it was actually an injury or if it was a contract issue that kept him off the field. But, Lamar, man, got paid. He got his bag this offseason, and he still averaged over 20 fantasy points a game, went on the field. And that was, in a very, very rough fantasy football or an NFL season for Lamar last year. He lost Marquise Brown in the offseason. Rashad Bateman was barely healthy. Mark Andrews actually wasn't even healthy. So, this is a guy that's trotting out there with a trio of weapons in James Prochet, Devin Duvernay, and Isaiah Likely. There was very little ability for this offense to ever get rolling. None of the defenses ever respected the pass game. They just kind of stacked the box and absolutely eviscerated Lamar Jackson. Probably what alluded to his injury as well, and added to his injury as well, as they just kept hitting him over and over again and rushing the passer because they knew there was really no downfield threat. With the addition of Odell, with the addition of Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman hopefully healthy, Mark Andrews now finally fully healthy, I think, and also with Todd Monken, he had his ceiling is sky's the limits. He's still gonna have that rushing ability. There will still be those designed runs, but I think this is gonna be an explosive air attack that we have not seen the likes of in Baltimore since Lamar Jackson had started playing football. I think this is really, an offense and a team that has committed to Lamar Jackson, committed to getting him the necessary weapons to go out and attack downfield and really create a more balanced offense. So, not only is this going to help him with more air yards, more passing touchdowns, but he'll also, it's going to open him up to allow for more scrambling, to have some of those signature Lamar Jackson plays where he rushes for 50 yards down the sideline after breaking out of the pocket. So, there is the concern of the unknown. All three of these wide receivers in Zay and Odell and Rashad still have concerns about them, whether it's injury, whether it's just we've never seen him do it in the NFL field before. Todd Monken, obviously a new offensive coach, a new scheme. How quickly will the Ravens adjust to this new offensive scheme? And obviously, we have the injury concern about Lamar, so his floor is much lower than Joe Burrow, but the sky's the limit. And honestly, maybe my favorite target, if I don't get one of those big three guys in the third round, and I'm still kind of in on those onesie positions of the quarterback, if I can get Lamar in the fifth round, I think I'm a really happy camper. It's one of my favorite picks in the draft so far. We're going to round out tier 2 with Justin Herbert. Yeah, Justin Herbert. Third-year quarterback out of Oregon for the Los Angeles Chargers. Said it right this time. Again, I'm in fairly consensus agreement with Sleeper. Again, they also rank him as the quarterback 6. He's my quarterback 6. His ADP right now is in the 6th round, which I don't think is egregious. Definitely would probably not be taking him towards the beginning of the 6th round, but towards the end of the 6th round, I'm definitely happy with that. Last year, he finished as the quarterback 11, averaging only 17 fantasy points per game, which definitely is a cause for concern. But there were so many things going against Justin Herbert last year that, can really explain away. I'm not trying to make excuses for the kid. He's super talented, but there are certainly a lot of things at play during the 2022 fantasy football season that led to him being a very underwhelming quarterback for fantasy football. First off, he had the broken ribs. That is an absolutely painful injury. It's an injury that when you breathe, it feels like a dagger is going into your chest. So the fact that he came back and played through it for most of the season was absolutely remarkable. The kid is tough. I love that mentality. And I hope he's fully healed up and can go back and attack the field in a normal way. He also lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams for most of the season. And despite how good Austin Eckler is, I don't think only having him on the field along with, they even lost Jalen Guyton to a torn ACL. So, you have Josh Palmer and Austin Eckler. Is just really the same thing we talked about with Lamar Jackson. There's no one to really threaten down the field, no real passing attack for the defense to respect, and they just passed the block, or they just packed the box and really kept pressure in his face and really made it very uncomfortable for Justin Herbert to throw the ball and be effective in the offense. Also, I want to say Joe Lombardi's play calling and offensive schemes were uninspiring at best. I'll leave it at that. I'm really, really hyped for what Kellen Moore can come in and do with this offense. I think, having Keenan healthy, having Mike Williams healthy, bringing in Quentin Johnson to be that third wide receiver, bringing in Kellen Moore to revamp the offense, and him being fully healthy, I think this is truly going to be a breakout season for Justin Herbert, and the sky is the limit for him as well. Definitely a great pick in the 6th round, and this is kind of like where I fall off. If I don't get one of those top 6 guys, I'm really punting the position. I'm not going to take a Justin Fields in the 6th round. I'm not going to take a Trevor Lawrence in the 7th round. I think there's just too much value down the board. And if we're talking, there's great middle round running backs to target, great middle round wide receivers like Jahan Dotson that I want to target. And then I'm actually going to probably, if I don't get those top 6 guys, well, now going into my tier 3, which also is another 3 quarterbacks, and I'll be probably waiting until the 9th round or the 10th round to pick up my quarterback 7, which is Tua Tagovailoa. Now, he's much lower on a lot of people's lists comparatively than to what I have him ranked as. A lot of people have him ranked as the quarterback 10 or 11. Sleeper has him ranked as the quarterback 11, which I think is absolutely egregious, going in the 9th or 10th round based on ADP. Then I think it's egregious. He averaged with the he averaged the 6th most fantasy points per game last year, better than Justin Herbert, better than Trevor Lawrence, better than Justin Fields. So even the games where he was injured and still continued to play through injury and wasn't doing that great, Tua was still putting up more fantasy points per game than Justin Fields. I'm going to bet on the guy that is averaging more points per game. It's the same reason why I picked Jalen Hurts over Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And also, we know the main concern why Tua is down here so low. Why so many people are so scared to take Tua is the injury concerns. With the concussions, with the 3 he suffered last year, with being unable to finish the season, with only being having to sit out multiple parts of the season, that is extremely concerning. And also the fact that he had to consider retirement this offseason is even more concerning. But here, I really don't want to make my evaluations based on injury. I don't want to sit here and, presume that someone's going to get injured and say, I'm not going to rank them highly, I'm not going to draft them because I just know they're going to miss half the season. I don't like betting on injuries. I think that Tua, for what it's worth, is a very smart human being. He'll go out, he'll do what he needs to take care of. He has bulked up, he has gone out and practiced how to fall, doing jiu-jitsu. He'll take care of his body better this year. And I think, fingers crossed, he will have a great season and stay healthy for the entirety of the season. And when he's on the field, he is shown to be absolutely amazing. And, also, this is an offense that is in place to make Tua succeed. You have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, 2 top 10 wide receivers in the league. You have Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert. This is the most fast. This is the most explosive, one of the fastest offenses built in the entire NFL. We know what an offensive guru Mike McDaniels is. I mean, if Tua can stay healthy, this is a guy that's going to be finishing top 5 week in, week out. So, I'd rather take that shot on that upside towards the 9th, 10th round than try to maybe go for a breakout in Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. That's my personal opinion. Once I got outside of the top 6, I'm waiting on Tua, but maybe you have a different opinion. So my number 8 ranked quarterback is Trevor Lawrence. Doesn't fall too far outside of the rankings. Actually, Sleeper also has him ranked as 8. Another guy has fallen a little bit farther for me, and we'll get to that and address all the haters here in a little bit. But Trevor Lawrence, currently his ADP is in the 7th round. He finished last year as the quarterback 8, averaging 17.9 fantasy points per game. He's a great quarterback. What can I say? If he can recreate what he had over the last 5 games of the fantasy football season last year, he will certainly be a top 5 fantasy quarterback, top 5 dynasty quarterback going forward. I mean, the talent with Trevor is absolutely no question. It's just, how is this offense going to come together? We saw it, basically click for half a season under Doug Peterson down there in Jacksonville, but I want to see it do that for more. I'm not taking a 6 to 7 game sample size and extrapolating it out over the next 2-3 seasons. I still have some questions that Trevor Lawrence has to answer for me. There's still some questions around the offense, whether Calvin Ridley is the same player he was 2 years ago. I know training camp looked good, but training camp is training camp. It's not the actual game. And we've seen a lot of players struggle when coming back from taking extensive time off from the NFL. And yes, it's going to be a very easy division in the AFC South to compete against. He should have a very great, easy schedule to go up against and, have the ability to put up a lot of points. But that's also where we see, I want to extrapolate a little bit from one of the last games of the season in week 17, where they absolutely blew the doors off of the Houston Texans. You know how many fantasy points Trevor Lawrence had in that game? 4. He had 4 fantasy points because he didn't need to play. They handed the ball off. Snoop Conner got a rushing touchdown. JaMychal Hasty got a rushing touchdown. And I think with the added investment Doug Peterson has made and his historical trends to use a lot of running backs and really establish the run as part of his NFL offense, I think it's going to really cap the upside of Trevor Lawrence. It's not going to be a Joe Burrow situation where coach is going to hand him the ball, say, hey, listen, you do what you do. You go attack the field. Ball's in your hands. No, I think, Doug Peterson really wants to bring a balanced approach. And I still have some concerns about, if his play can extrapolate over a full season, over 2 seasons. And I get it. If you want to bet on the breakout, That's totally justified. I hear your argument and I understand your argument. I'm just not going to bet on the breakout just because I think there are better prospects and better values down the board. But hey, if I'm wrong, this would be a great value pick. Moving on to my number 9th ranked quarterback, and a guy that, a lot of people have in their 6th or 7th spot, and it's going to be Justin Fields. And it's the same reason with Trevor Lawrence. People have him ranked 6th because they're predicting a breakout. They're predicting this massive leap for Justin Fields. The fact that he has had the most money on Vegas to be the MVP or win MVP is absolutely crazy. More money than Mahomes, Allen, or Jalen Hurts, which I think is ridiculous. And I think the reason why Justin Fields is ranked so highly and why people are projecting the breakout is because they're looking at this quarterback prospect through some rose-colored glasses. We saw a quarterback just like this in a very similar situation last year take a massive step forward and get into the MVP caliber in Jalen Hurts. A guy really high rushing upside, maybe a little bit inaccurate, came to the passing, had to work on his passing game. They brought in a dominant wide receiver 1 to add to the offense. They reinforced the offensive line, and he takes that massive leap going into year 3, becomes an MVP caliber candidate. Okay, Justin Fields is not Jalen Hurts. I get there's a lot of similarities. They beefed up the offensive line, going out and signing, I think it was Mike McGlinchey from the 49ers. They go out and draft Darnell Wright after trading with the Eagles, get him number 10 overall in the NFL draft. Apparently he's had a very good camp so far. They go out and they trade for DJ Moore, who's an incredible wide receiver in his own right. But the main difference with Jalen Hurts and why I was willing to go in on Jalen Hurts and feed that projection is the fact that there has been evidence that Jalen Hurts, ever since his time back at Alabama, through Oklahoma, through his time at the Eagles organization, continued to improve and progress as a passer. Each year, I believe it was something crazy. It was like 9 to 10. He had a passing grade improvement of, I think, 6 or 7 points every year from his time at Alabama through his time with the Eagles, according to PFF, which is incredible. It is honestly, it's funny if you look at it and you chart it out, it's like a very, very linear growth. So we saw a guy that was willing to put in the work, willing to continue to grow his game, and saw a very repeatable pattern of growth and improvement that we could then very confidently say, okay, he is going to get better with these additions, not only intrinsically, but with the additions around him. Justin Fields has regressed as a passer, and I don't want to get into all like the stats and the data. I could be sitting here for 15 minutes listing out all the numbers, but overall, he has regressed as a passer since his time at Ohio State. So instead of looking at a history of improvement and projecting that to continue, we're looking at a history of a guy that was a good passer, really declined, and we're projecting him to get back to that similar level of passing that he experienced in college at Ohio State with the additions to the offensive line and with the additions of wide receiver around him. I think it's a much better bet to, bet on continued improvement rather than hoping someone, regains their form. It's similar to saying, hey, we look at Russell Wilson. Everyone last year, he's going to regain his form with the Broncos. Aaron Rodgers, he's going to regain his form with the Jets. Russell Wilson, again, he's going to regain his form with the with Sean Payton as head coach. And I get it. That's a very different conversation because two are approaching the end of their careers. And we already talked about with Aaron and Russ, when they fall off a cliff, that could be it. Once it goes with the quarterback, it goes hard and fast and you can't really recover it. But with Justin Fields, we saw a very steep decline in his passing performance from college to the NFL. Maybe he does continue to grow, but I'm just not projecting the same level of growth as Jalen Hurts because, it's harder to reclaim something you lost than it is to continue to improve. But that being said, he's an insane athlete from the running aspect. I continue to expect him to deliver on the ground and provide a massive baseline of rushing. It's just not a guy that I'm willing to take the shot on in the 6th round, especially with a lot of other high-end talent with the running back and wide receiver position around him than that I think is more safe, if that makes sense. So that's going to wrap up Tier 3. Tier 3 was Tua at 7, Trevor at 8, and Justin Field at 9. We're going to try to wrap this up, a little bit quickly here. We have 6 more prospects. We're going to hit 15. So in our Tier 4, we have Dak Prescott, a guy that, I've seen a lot of people really slander and throw a lot of hate on. And even myself, as a biased Eagles fan, I don't really hate the guy. I think he's actually a pretty good quarterback. So I don't understand why people are a little bit lower on him. He did finish last year as a QB 18, but we do have to realize that he is coming in. He was coming off of a broken thumb and missed 5 games. It's obviously going to be a little bit skewed. And also, it took him a little bit of a time to get his groove back once he got back on the field. But, when he was back on the field, he was averaging 17.8 fantasy points per game. Very similar to Marks, to Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, to Tua Tagovailoa. He was the lowest out of all 3 of them, but he was only 0.6 points behind Tua. So, on a points per game basis, he was up there with those tier 3 quarterbacks that I do like a little bit higher. And again, he has been consistently rumored as a turnover machine, a guy that throws a lot of interceptions. But if you go back and look at it, there's at least 3 or 4 interceptions last year that, just weren't his fault. I mean, I can remember one vividly at the end of the Jacksonville Jaguars game that bounced off of Noah Brown's hands and was returned for a pick 6 to end the game. That's not Dak's fault. That was honestly, is Noah Brown's fault. And I know people are predicting a step back with this offense. I mean, Mike McCarthy is an absolute buffoon. Don't know why he would come back and say we don't want to score as much. That is absolutely ridiculous and lunacy. But I think despite what's being said, despite bringing in Brian Schottenheimer, who is notorious at running the ball and not opening up the passing game, their offseason moves indicate that they still continue to invest in the passing game and they're still going to have a prolific offense. Michael Gallup is coming in his second year back from a torn ACL. They went out and they signed Brandon Cooks to continue to be that wide receiver 2 to help open up the passing game. And, CeeDee Lamb is obviously their wide receiver 1 guy. They've paid him a absolute boatload of money, and he will continue to produce for the team. They go out, they draft Luke Schoonmaker high in the draft. They've continued to say that Jake Ferguson is a really good tight end. They have him listed as tight end 1 on the depth chart. So, and it's just every offseason move, without getting too nitty-gritty into it, supports they will still facilitate a decent passing attack, enough for Dak Prescott to be a top 10 fantasy quarterback as long as he can stay healthy, which is why you come in at number 10 for me. At number 11, a very risky prospect for me, but right now we're getting into the high-end backups. Hopefully you already have picked up a quarterback at this point. After number 10, really not great. You might as well just punt the position all the way down the board. But Anthony Richardson is not a guy that I'd be taking as my first quarterback off the board. A guy is thinking as a high-end backup. If you have Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson is a good stash in the 10th, 11th round after you've already rounded out your team. In case Lamar Jackson does get injured, when you have those guys with injury concerns, you might want to spend up a little bit on a higher-end backup at the quarterback position. That's what Anthony Richardson can provide. And I mean, my analysis here, I have him as quarterback 11, a little bit higher than consensus. Sleeper has him at quarterback 12. Like I said, his ADP is in the 10th, 11th round. But I mean, this dude, I'm primarily basing this all off the fact that he is a freak athlete. He is going to be a guy that he's not like an athletic quarterback. He is the most athletic quarterback in the history of the combine. The best broad jump, the best 40 time. I mean, this dude is an absolute freak of nature. And if he can put it all together, he's an incredibly rare and raw prospect, which I don't know if it's going to translate for NFL success, but for us in fantasy, it's going to be incredible because whenever he gets nervous, whenever he gets out of the side of the pocket, he is going to run. He's going to be a high-end running back that touches the ball more than any running back in the NFL ever should have the right to touch it. He's going to go out, and I'm predicting that he'll probably rack up 800 or so rushing yards over the course of the season, especially playing in the AFC South division against some pretty bad defenses. We have the Houston Texans, who were the worst rushing defense last year. We have Titans, who were a good defense. Jeremy Simmons, that's not right. Simmons, whatever his name is, whatever his first name is, obviously a great defensive tackle. But overall, they were a team that regressed heavily last year, and not a team that also sold off a lot of parts. I don't expect them to be that good this season. And again, there's a lot of pieces in Jacksonville to make them good, but overall, they are not going to be a dominant defense. So, a lot of opportunity for Anthony Richardson to just absolutely rush up his own fantasy score by continuing to scramble outside of the pocket. And hopefully Shane Steichen, I'm really believing in what Shane Steichen has accomplished with Justin Herbert, with Jalen Hurts, and turning that quarterback development into Anthony Richardson and making him an incredible quarterback, not only in the NFL, but for fantasy. And his absolute athletic rushing side ability outside of his absolute cannon of an arm should give you a really, really solid baseline for fantasy football as a high-end backup. Rounding out my tier 4 of quarterbacks is a guy that I think is really disrespected in Jared Goff. Of quarterback for the Detroit Lions. Currently, Sleeper has him ranked as the quarterback 17, and he's not going off the board until like the 12th, 13th rounds of drafts. Come on, put some respect in this man's name. He was averaging over 17 points per game last year and finished as the quarterback 10. I mean, I already have joked about renaming this channel the Ben Johnson Fan Club channel just because I am very much a fan of his offensive scheme and what he's able to do. But this is a scheme that Jared Goff, he's not going to have the rushing ability of a Jalen Hurts. He doesn't have the arm of a Patrick Mahomes, doesn't have the IQ of a Joe Burrow, doesn't have the coolness of a Joe Burrow, doesn't have the cannon of a Lamar Jackson or an Anthony Richardson, but he is in such a great situation to do well. You have a great offensive-minded offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, who is one of the most sought-after, if not the most sought-after head coaching prospect this past offseason. You have a renewed fervor and, a lot of investment into the offensive weapons. You're going to be getting Jameson Williams back this year, 1 year removed from that torn ACL. You drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, number 12 overall in the first round. You drafted Sam Laporta with the third pick in the second round. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's one of the most preeminent wide receivers in the league, especially for fantasy. It's going to be a great offense. And, last year we saw this was an offense that was top 5 in points scored and offensive efficiency. And if you're the quarterback helming the ship for that, you're going to be a very good beneficiary. Jared Goff, definitely a high-end backup. Or if you've been just completely sniped on quarterbacks, he's a guy that I'm actually okay with you taking as your first quarterback. Maybe as you kind of get 2 or 3 guys at the end of the round or at the end of the draft to share that quarterback position, he's a guy that I think has a high floor, maybe not a high ceiling, but a guy that can go in. And he's not going to absolutely sink your submarine. You can actually put up some pretty decent fantasy scores, some 25, 26-point weeks. So that's why he rounds up my tier 4 as quarterback 12 for me. And then these are some guys that I really just do want to take shots on at the end of the draft. Got to talk about Kyler Murray. He's currently ranked quarterback 20 according to Sleeper. I have him ranked in the quarterback 13. Just to reiterate, this is my tier 5, the last 3 quarterbacks that I would actually be taking in drafts. Kyler Murray, he had the ACLs that he suffered in week 12 of last year. Obviously, very, very brutal injury for Kyler, and you don't know how he's going to return, how that's going to affect his athleticism. It's also a team that is an absolute shambles in the Arizona Cardinals. They basically tore down the entire thing this offseason, shipped off DeAndre Hopkins. They got rid of Cliff Kingsbury, got rid of Steve Keim. They brought a new general manager, brought in a new head coach. So you don't know what's going to really go on, but you just can't bet against talent. And Kyler Murray has looked amazing. He's on the sideline, not walking with a limp. He could be as back as early as, week 8 of the NFL. And if you're getting a guy who's been a perennial top 5 player at his position in fantasy in the 12th round, well, yeah, I'm definitely going to take him there as my high-end backup. And guess what? If you have an IR spot, literally any other wide receiver or running back you're taking in the 12th or 13th round, you're probably going to drop them week 1 or week 2 anyways. So might as well take Kyler Murray, stash him on your IR spot, then go pick up someone else off of waivers after the draft is over. But despite all the negativity surrounding the Arizona Cardinals, surrounding Kyler Murray, surrounding his immaturity from last offseason with the contract, and there's still lingering things about he does not paying attention to the game, doesn't watch film, just likes playing Call of Duty and video games. But he's a guy that's produced at the fantasy football level, and getting this talent this cheap is almost unheard of. Might as well take that shot at the end of your drafts and stash him on your IR. My 14th quarterback is going to be Jordan Love. A guy that I'm willing to take the risk on him. He's currently being undrafted in drafts. So, maybe you don't have to draft him. You can pick him up off the waivers after your draft is over. Currently ranked as a QB 21 right after Murray. I have him ranked in the QB 14. I'm just, really going to take this and try to project that he's going to do well. This is a quarterback that, when you see him coming in as backup, or when he came in last year behind Aaron Rodgers, he had moments of brilliance. You're not looking for him to be this incredible quarterback. He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes from the get-go. He just has to show you that he can put it together and can be special, at least for very small amounts of time. And we've seen that. We've seen that in preseason. We've seen that in the regular season. And I think under Matt LaFleur, with a lot of who is an offensive-minded coach, a guy that really revamped Aaron Rodgers' career. I think he's going to know exactly what to do with Jordan Love to make him successful. He might not be a top tier fantasy quarterback, but he's a guy that will come in. If he's a Kirk Cousins or a Jared Goff and you're getting him off the waiver wire as a high-end backup, that's a great steal. And finally, rounding out quarterback number 15, the one, the only, Kirk Cousins. Honestly, just go watch the quarterback documentary on Netflix. It was absolutely hysterical, kind of a real funny insight into Kirk Cousins. I think he's a good guy, a great quarterback. He might not be long for the NFL, as this is his last season under contract with the Minnesota Vikings, but I think he's going to absolutely tear it up when it comes to fantasy this year. Well, tear it up might be a little bit of an overstatement, but he's a decent quarterback. Last year, he finished as the quarterback 7, averaging over 18 fantasy points per game. This year, he's ranked as the quarterback 13, and you can scoop him up in the 9th or the 10th round. Just a guy that's put in a position to succeed in a very weak division in the NFC North, that he can tear up the defense of the Detroit Lions, of the Chicago Bears, of the Green Bay Packers, all notoriously bad defenses for fantasy football. He has the best wide receiver in the game, and Justin Jefferson throwing to, going to obviously make him look good. They brought in another legit receiving threat in Jordan Addison, one of my favorite rookies from this past season. I think he's going to be absolute dominant wide receiver 2 across the field from Justin Jefferson. And then you're going to have TJ Hawkinson as a high-end tight end tearing up the middle of the field in the short to intermediate routes. All of this to say that a lot of those wide receivers, a lot of those weapons, and a very offensive-minded head coach in Kevin O'Connell, he's going to make Kirk Cousins look good. He's not going to have those big blow-up games, but, he was definitely a guy that was viable for fantasy, can lead a competent passing offense, and, a team that was top 10 in offensive points scored and offensive efficiency last year. In the same way we talked about with Jared Goff, if you can be the guy that's captain of the ship that's scoring these high-scoring fantasy points, more often than not, it's going to result pretty well for you. So that is my top 15 quarterbacks that I wanted to go over. Just to recap, number 1, Jalen Hurts. Number 2, Patrick Mahomes. Number 3, Josh Allen. And that's our top tier 1. Number 4, Joe Burrow. Then Lamar Jackson at 5, Justin Herbert at 6. That's tier 2. Tier 3 is Tua, followed by Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields at 9. Tier 4 at number 10 is Dak Prescott. At number 11 is Anthony Richardson. Number 12 is Jared Goff. And finally, tier 5, the really high-end backups, the guys that I'm kind of scooping up at the end of my draft, is going to be number 13, Kyler Murray. Number 14, Jordan Love. And number 15, Kirk Cousins. So, as these drafts start to kick off, as the NFL season gets closer, hopefully this kind of gives you a better insight into the quarterback values and where I think you should be taking them. As always, I know I was slacking a little bit on the running back rankings that I put out. I will have that. I literally just remembered to put them out while I was doing this video. So I'll put out the running back rankings, the total list on my Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. I will then go ahead and put out the quarterback rankings so you can have those tiers as well. And stay around. We have one more position group to cover on Thursday. It's going to be tight ends. Should be a fun one, guys. Take care.